Hey there, everyone. It's child therapist Mister Stu with another episode of Bad Kids Don't Exist. This is the podcast that helps adults better understand kids to create environments where kids and their caregivers thrive. Today, I'm going to be talking about the importance of discussing difficult emotions with kids. I'll tell you what happens when a kid feels a big emotion they don't understand. I'll tell you what happens when emotions aren't discussed, and I'll give you some tips on how to discuss difficult emotions with your little ones. But before we jump into that, if you're looking for more videos on children's mental health and how to best support the little ones in your life, this is the channel for you. Make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out. A few weeks ago, I talked about helping kids regulate their emotions. And some of the main feedback I got from that episode was parents wanting to understand how to better discuss emotions with their kids. Today, I'm going to focus on discussing difficult emotions, but keep in mind, talking about all emotions, ones that are fun to feel and ones that are not so fun to feel. Both of those are important. When I was in middle school, I went to a Chinese buffet and pigged out. There were only a few things I enjoyed eating, but I would eat those things endlessly. I would pile my plate up and just scarf down. But after one visit to the buffet, I felt a little different than normal. I woke up the day after having gone to the buffet with a terrible turning in my stomach. I knew what that meant, so I ran to the bathroom, and when I got there, I threw up more than I ever imagined was humanly possible. For 2 days, I did not stop having those vomit episodes. And I can remember that one time while I was hunched over the toilet, vomiting, I was crying and thinking I was about to die. Surely no one could survive what I was going through. That's when my parents stepped in. And as they comforted me, they were doing the rubbing my back and just being there with me while I was sick. They said, "You've got some really bad food poisoning. It's not fun, I know, but you'll be all right in a few days." Now, those words didn't make the vomit stop. They didn't make the fever go away, but they did help my mental state by telling me there is a name for what I was going through. Other people have gone through it, and sooner or later, it'll be over. When kids feel big emotions, it can be very scary, just like me having that food poisoning. Imagine you're going through your day and all of a sudden you feel your heart start to beat faster, your breathing gets more shallow and rapid, you may even get sweaty and tense and your mind starts to race. As an adult, maybe you know that's the emotion anxiety. And because you know the name of it, you know that it's a normal thing to feel. Other people have felt it, and eventually that feeling is going to fade. But imagine what it's like if you don't know the name of that emotion. Do you see how scary that could feel? To have all of those bodily sensations, the heart rate, the breathing, the sweatiness, the tension, and racing thoughts, and you believe you're the only one who's ever felt that way. All of a sudden, this emotion that's totally normal to feel feels like it's going to take over and you're going to die. Putting a name to an emotion is one of the best ways we can help kids learn to tolerate and regulate those emotions. Just like me when I was having that food poisoning episode and I had no idea what was going on. I thought it was the end for me. Once my parents named it for me, I was able to calm down and understand there is a name for this thing. Other people have gone through it, and sooner or later, it's going to be over. The movie Inside Out 2 just came out last weekend, and that whole movie is about helping kids understand there are names for those tough feelings, and it's okay to feel all of them. The reason that movie is having so much success, other than the fact that it's an amazing Disney Pixar movie, is because understanding emotions is really hard for kids to do on their own. Maybe you see that in your own kids. It's become a pretty common occurrence for me to discuss the prefrontal cortex on this podcast. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's right behind the forehead right here. And if you haven't listened to any other episodes, shame on you. Check them out. But what you'll hear me talk about often is the prefrontal cortex helps people fully process and understand situations and language. And kids don't really have access to that part of their brain. What that means is when kids feel big emotions and they feel all the big sensations in their bodies, they cannot think rationally or logically about those things on their own. The part of their brain that would help them do that isn't connected. Because kids can't think rationally about those big emotions because they're so complicated, when they feel those big emotions, their brains can go into a fight or flight response. Basically, they panic about their emotions. That's where you have to step in and help them stay in control. It's a process called co-regulation. You work with your child to help them regulate, and over time, they can learn to regulate themselves rather than going into that panic at all. When you can look at your child whose heart rate has increased, whose breathing is more rapid, who is sweaty and tense and has racing thoughts, and you can calmly say, "It looks like you're feeling anxious." That can be a tough feeling to feel. All of a sudden, just like me and my food poisoning, their stress comes down as they understand there is a name for this thing, other people have felt it, and sooner or later it will end. So, how do you have these discussions with kids? Because if you'll have those discussions, then not only can they come to you to co-regulate, but over time their brain can start to say, "Oh, we felt this before. There's a name for it. Other people have felt it, and sooner or later, I know that it's going to end." But if kids' language skills aren't great, then how in the world can you talk about these subjects that are difficult for even adults to understand? Let me give you a few tips. But before I jump into tips, let me tell you about the main trap I see parents fall into in discussing emotions with their kids, or when they notice difficult emotions in their children. The main trap is parents trying to fix the emotion in their child. Let's say your child is feeling sad because they didn't get invited to a birthday party. I know parents who will call up the parent of the child having the party and ask that their child be invited. Or maybe their child is feeling anxious about a school presentation. I've seen parents call and tell the teacher their child should not have to present in front of the class. That fixing sends a few messages to the child. First, it sends the message that the emotion must be bad or dangerous, and if that emotion is experienced, it's something that needs to be fixed immediately. Do you see how that message can raise tension each time the child feels the emotion. If they feel like, oh, I need to get out of this as soon as I possibly can, it's not something to try to tolerate and regulate, it's something to try to get away from, then that tension goes up as they are experiencing the emotion. It also sends the message that their emotions are someone else's responsibility. Because you fixed it for them, they don't need to learn to tolerate and regulate their emotions on their own. And I believe that's a big reason why we have so many children who become dysregulated due to their emotions. Too many well-meaning adults have stepped in and fixed emotions rather than trying to help children understand their emotions. And finally, fixing an emotion sends the message that other people must be bad if they caused you to feel a way that ends up needing to be fixed. It puts the burden, the responsibility on another person to not act a certain way, rather than putting the burden on you to learn how to deal with it when someone acts that way. Don't we see that all the time? Don't we see that people are blaming other people for the way that they're feeling rather than learning to just deal with those feelings? Fixing an emotion for your child sends the message that it's someone else's responsibility, not their own. Don't fall into the trap of trying to fix emotions for your child. Emotions are not things to be fixed. They are to be experienced. And if they're difficult, they are to be tolerated and regulated. Don't try to fix them. So if fixing is what you should not do, what is it you should do? Rather than fixing, it's important to help kids face their emotions. It might seem silly, but we can think of big, difficult emotions as monsters for kids. When you were little and you got into bed, did you ever have your parents check under your bed or in your closet for monsters? It can give a little bit of peace if your parent checks and tells you there's nothing there. But did you ever check under your bed or in your closet yourself? There was a Disney Channel movie called Don't Look Under the Bed that came out when I was a kid, and that movie was terrifying. As a matter of fact, in doing research for this episode of the podcast, I researched that movie, and it is rated as the #1 scariest Disney Channel original movie of all time. There was this horrific monster that would reach out and grab kids' feet and pull them under the bed. After I saw that movie, I would leap into my bed. I wouldn't just step into my bed. It would be from far away that I would run and jump and land in my bed so that my feet wouldn't be anywhere near where the monster could reach out and grab them. I would even tuck my feet in my blanket so the monster couldn't reach up and touch my bare feet. But one night, I decided I was finally going to look under the bed. I was terrified. I can remember thinking that when I lifted up the bed skirt, I was going to see a hand reach out and grab me and pull me under the bed and take me to some unknown world. It took me several minutes to get up the courage to lean over and check. And as I moved towards the edge of the bed, my heart started beating out of my chest. I was breathing heavy. I was terrified. I counted down in my head with a 3, 2, 1, and then I grabbed the bed skirt, pulled it up, and looked, and there was nothing there. All of a sudden, all of those feelings went away. And it was like a breath of fresh air. The same is true for kids and emotions. Rather than helping them avoid them or trying to fix them or even just telling them everything's okay, like a parent looking under the bed or in the closet for a child, it's important to help children face their emotions head on. It can be really scary as a kid gets to the edge of approaching that emotion and trying to understand that emotion and really peeling back the curtain and seeing what's going on with that emotion. But then when they lift up the bed skirt or open that closet door or face their emotion head on, they'll see there's nothing actually there. The emotion they thought was a monster is actually nothing to be afraid of. Help your child become an emotional adventurer and explore their emotions, face their emotions, discover their emotions head on. As they learn to explore them, they'll be less scared to feel them. Practically, let me tell you how that looks. Here are the 3 steps that I recommend when you're having a discussion with a child about a difficult emotion. Step number 1 is name the emotion for them. Just like me with the food poisoning, this helps children to understand there is a name for this thing. Because there's a name for it, it means this is not the first time this thing has happened. They're not the first ones to feel it, and they are not a freak for feeling it. Second is to ask them what it feels like to them to feel that emotion. Ask them what their body feels like, what thoughts they're having, or maybe even what experience might have triggered the emotion. This lets them know you want to understand their experience, and it's not something that has to be avoided. Oftentimes when children feel a difficult emotion, adults want to help the child get away from the emotion, but that sends the message there must be something scary or dangerous on the other side of the emotion. When you dive deep into it and have the child explain how their body is feeling, what thoughts they're having, all of those different things, you're showing the child this emotion is not something that has to be avoided or fixed. It's just something that's going on. So step number 1, name the emotion for the child. Step number 2, ask them the open-ended questions about what it feels to them to experience that emotion. And step number 3 is to normalize the emotion. This is where you can share that you know what it feels like. And even though it's uncomfortable, and even though it's big, and even though it might be really tough, it's gonna be okay. This helps the child know that they will survive this feeling. Now, if you want to know more about helping children regulate their emotions, you can check out episode 3 of this podcast. It's in the archives on both Spotify and YouTube. But understand that just having the discussion about an emotion, naming it, exploring it, and normalizing it, you are helping your child face that emotion and seeing that it's really nothing to be scared of. It can help so much of that fear about their emotions go away, and the discussion in and of itself can help kids stay in control. It can seem that kids don't know how to deal with their emotions, but it's usually because we, the adults, haven't done a very good job of helping them understand those emotions. We can help kids understand that it's okay to feel however they feel. Other people have felt the same ways, and sooner or later, those emotions will pass. Kids having trouble dealing with their emotions are not bad kids. Because remember, some things exist, some things don't. Bad kids don't exist. I love helping adults better understand kids to create environments where kids and their caregivers thrive. If that sounds like a good match for you and your next event, be sure to click the link in the description to this video to find out all the information you need to hire me as a workshop leader or a keynote speaker. I can't wait to work with you and make your next event a great one.